Welcome back to the Today with Tally podcast, folks. We have a great show in store for you today, but we have hit a milestone, folks. That's right, 200 episodes. This is episode 200. In 15 months, we are going to be joined by retired U.S. Marine Sergeant Major James Cabarrus. But first,
hello, friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Today with Tally. The mission and goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and search Today with Tally. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the program as well. Ladies and gentlemen, your host of the evening, Mr. Brian Tally.
Sergeant Major James Cabarrus is no stranger to the Today with Tally podcast, folks. He was on episode 9 on August the 19th. If you want to go check out that episode before you may listen to this one, I definitely encourage all of you out there to go listen to that very impactful show. It added so much value. This man spent 23 years of his life serving honorably and courageously in the United States Marine Corps. And with that, we are honored to be joined by Sergeant Major James Cabarrus, retired. You go by what, James now?
James, sounds good, man.
You know, when I had you on 15 months ago, you had retirement on your mind. However, you were still in active duty. Sergeant Major, I believe you were a Command Sergeant Major of RS Houston?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And, you know, you were looking at retirement and what that may look like. Is retirement everything you thought it would be?
I'll say, Brian, first of all, man, thanks for having me on again. I definitely appreciate it. Congrats on your milestone. You know, looking when I was on last time from episode 9, now you're at episode 200. Some outstanding guests, a lot of knowledge being dropped. So all good stuff there, man. Is it everything I expected? I would say, Brian, it is everything I expected and a bag of chips. Like, it is absolutely amazing. Still, you know, love my time in uniform. I'll always be a Marine just like yourself. But life is good on this side of the fence. Like, I'm enjoying it so far.
Now, the bag of chips, Fritos, Doritos, I mean.
Oh, definitely Fritos, 100%.
Okay. 100%. Yeah, those Frito chili pies are pretty good. I tell you what, eat it right out of the bag.
No doubt.
So, and you could do that now without having to, you know, have a weight check. But I know you stay in good shape.
Trying.
I know those boys are keeping you busy behind you there. I know you're always at football games and track meets and you name it, you're there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They have an endless supply of energy. So that's what kind of keeps me going and keeps me on my toes as well. So,
sure. So people always talk about, the transition from civilian life or from the military life back into the civilian sector. And now you've been at this now for just over a year now, and you're actually working with Comcast. What has that transition been like, other than just explaining it as it's everything you thought it would be plus a bag of chips?
I would say that it has been great for me, and I think I attribute that to preparation and just surrounding myself with good people. The old saying or the old adage of your network is your net worth. I 100% believe that. I've had opportunities during the transition that I would not have had if I wouldn't have had, some very influential people in my corner that helped me to prepare everything from how to interview to resume writing. Comcast was great, in their program for Skill Bridge, which aids and helps in the transition. So definitely, man, preparation is what I would say really goes into it. The more you prepare, the better off you're going to be in that transition going from active duty service to retirement.
Sure. And I know you put it out there well in advance that you had come to the conclusion that you will be retiring, and all of a sudden all those gears were in motion. You were, working as a Marine, and on your time off, you would, start the interview process. So exactly when that EAS came, you were hitting the ground running. I mean, I've never really seen a transition so seamless before as one that you put on. And you really put on a clinic that is definitely taking you to the next step in your life. You were a leadership coach. You're a resilience coach. What's that aspect been like in training, if you will, civilians?
It's been different, right? Because I think that depending on our past, we all have a different perspective as we do different things in life. So the key, though, is trying to find that common bond, that commonality, that common denominator. Whenever I was teaching Marines or instructing Marines, regardless of the subject, it was easy because we have that common bond. We share, being United States Marines together. One thing that I noticed on the civilian side was that I had to find a common bond when it comes to teaching resiliency and things like that. It's like we need to be able to speak the same language. So how can I speak the same language with someone? And I just got done with 23 years in uniform. I mean, if I do the math, I've actually spent more time in the Marine Corps than I have outside of the Marine Corps because I joined at 18. So for me, it was, as I'm talking to people in the civilian sector, we're talking about, engaged leadership and culture and climate and balanced feedback. I think the key is to find a common bond that we can all understand. So I would try to use a lot of analogies and things like that, whether it's road signs or parenting tips and skills, something that the average person understands simply because we're Americans.
I know you do have a lot of connectivity with literally every single, person out there, with every walk of life. You can definitely get along with everybody and find that common bond, even if it's rooting for the same sports team. You can now have a discussion, right? A civil discussion, and we're living in a world today where everybody is at everybody's throats and this and that. And, there's just a lot of, strife out there to be had. But when you sit down with a man like yourself, you can really identify with so many, of the issues that are out there, and again, come to a conclusion that, hey, we got a lot more in common than what we're being told, and what
absolutely
people think that we do. Now, you talk a lot about preparation. Now, there's a lot of veterans out there that do struggle with this transition. Do you and you've been very good at it. I mean, you've done this well. And when I say you've put on a clinic, you have, and I've seen it, through, a set of lenses that, was always looking. And like I said, the work you're doing out there is incredible. And that's why we have you back on this podcast to talk about it, because I know there's so much value that can be added to folks that may be getting out of the military soon, or have found themselves struggling after post-service. Is there any advice that you could lay down on the table for those service members out there that either may be struggling or getting ready to transition out of the military?
Yeah, I would say specifically for those that are about to transition, old school pen and paper, whiteboard, however you want to do it. But I would simply write where I want to be at in the next 5 years. And then just kind of back plan from there and ask yourself, what is everything that I need to get me from where I'm at now to then? And then I think the most effective thing I did was I asked myself, what can go wrong? I kind of listed out every single issue that I thought could go wrong, everything from not getting the job I wanted to finances being disrupted. And then once I figured out what could go wrong, I had to ask myself, I have to make a plan for that. Okay, if X could happen, and this could be detrimental to my transition, what's the plan for that? How do I avoid that? I think when we do that, we at least come up with about the 95% solution. Of course, nothing is 100%, and we always have to be willing to bounce back when adversity and strife does set in. But I think we go into it planning for how do I overcome adversity? How do I overcome things that can go wrong? We're going to be better off because of it.
Sure. Now, from combat to corporate, right? Explain what it's been like going from combat to corporate.
I have absolutely, Brian, found a lot of similarities between combat and corporate America, right? And that sounds weird to say. When I say this to people, sometimes they're like, there's no way. But I've been able to draw a line. And with that line, I want to go ahead and I'm going to write my book and publish it next year. It's going to be out next summer. But what Combat to Corporate is, it explains that there are certain lessons learned on the battlefield that are absolutely applicable in corporate America. I'll say it again. There are lessons learned on the battlefield that are applicable in corporate America, right? And not, of course, from a sense of fighting or things like that, but just some of the principles that we use in war fighting. If we use those same principles for leadership in corporate America, we're going to be better as a result of it.
Explain what some of these lessons that you've learned on the battlefield can be applicable to the corporate sector.
So one of the things we did in Iraq during the invasion in 2003, literally remember it like it was yesterday. I remember we were pinned down. Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, and we needed to get out of that position that we were in and advance onto a building. Off in the distance, there was a very large blue building. And so what happened was we had a machine gun team attached to us. My platoon sergeant at the time, he put the machine gun team in what's called a support by fire position, right? And what that is he told the machine gunners to pick up from where they're at currently, move to an elevated position, and start to suppress with machine gun fire this huge blue building. When that happened, the enemy then stopped firing, and it allowed my squad and I to pick up and start advancing forward. So what happens in the Marine Corps is we call that setting conditions. So setting conditions is simply having rules, policies, or procedures in place that allow the success for other people, that enables the success of other people. So when that machine gun squad was set in place and they were able to fire in that building, and then now we were no longer being shot at, now my squad was able to pick up and advance forward. So when I fast forward, 20 years later to corporate America, and I think of the word setting conditions, how does that look? Well, any leader, any manager, any supervisor should always be setting conditions for the people that work for them. Again, when we're talking about combat, the definition of setting conditions is rules, policies, procedures, or things in play that allow for the success of other people. Well, if I'm a leader, if I'm a manager, what rules, policies, and procedures do I have in my workplace that is allowing for the success of people that work for me? And if we draw that out and we compare that to what employees want, whether it's culture, climate, engagement, more PTO, raises, whatever it is, it's my job as a leader to ensure the success of other people. And so that's just kind of one example of we set conditions in combat and it looks one way. We set conditions in corporate America and it looks another way. But that principle of setting conditions is absolutely the same from combat to corporate.
And I've always called you a Marine's Marine, so what would I call you in the civilian world? A civilian?
I think James, that's what I've been called a lot, right? It took some time to get used to that.
You're a likable guy. You're smart. I mean, you're intelligent beyond your years. You're genuine. You're sincere. And you also have that Marine mentality. So you got that junkyard dog in you. But you can also sit down with folks that may be having a really bad day, and you can get into them and you can help heal them. Now, I just spent the day at Camp Hope in Houston yesterday, where they have 115 veterans down there that are really struggling with life challenges and overcoming, adversity in their life, and have really struggled with drug dependency and alcohol since getting out of the military. Now, I know we've talked about all the good that you have experienced since your transition, but what has been one of the most difficult parts of transitioning from the Marine Corps to the civilian sector?
I would say that you can easily find yourself feeling like you're on an island. You're on a deserted island and there's nobody else around, regardless of how much support you got and things like that, which is all great, right? But the military in general, and specifically for us, the Marine Corps, really does provide that sense of camaraderie, that sense of brotherhood, that sense of sisterhood. just that feeling that I have somebody else to depend on, rely on, and lean on. And so when you remove yourself from that situation, it can feel lonely. I like to explain it in the sense of a barbecue grill, right? Because I love to barbecue. I love to grill out. Well, if you have your fire pit there and your barbecue grill, and there's a bunch of coals on that grill, the reason the coals are staying hot is because they're feeding off of one another. If you take those set of hot coals and you pick up one and move it off to the side, that coal is going to grow cold. The rest of them will stay hot. The reason that one off to the side is growing cold is because it no longer has that sense of connectedness with everybody else. And when we retire, we transition from active duty service to the civilian sector. That's what happens sometimes. That coal is now picked up and is moved off to the side. You're leaving that base, you're leaving that environment, and you're going back to hometown America. And you can find yourself growing cold really, really quickly if you don't have other coals around you, or in that sense, other Marine brothers, Marine sisters. You know, regardless of what branch you're in, you have to stay connected to keep that heat going.
You have no idea how many times I've quoted you over the last 199 episodes, and I will use that one. And I always do give you credit as the Sergeant Major deserves. That's amazing. I've never looked at 20 coals burning together as one, and you remove the one, it's going to burn itself out. It's going to isolate. It's going to be cold. And before you know it, you've got 19 and you got one down. That's impressive. That is some very serious value. And I mean, looking at it, and I know you're a country boy. Where you?
Oh yeah.
It's a nice. I mean, you've been on a horse in uniform. I mean, you're as country boy as they get with the fishing and the hunting and all that, man. You talk about coals, man. I tell you what, man, you got that book's going to be good. I can't wait to see that book. Now, you're writing this book now, correct?
Correct. Yep, that's correct.
And the name of the book is going to be From Combat to Corporate, correct?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. From combat to corporate.
And this book is going to be published in the summer of 2024, correct?
Yes, sir.
Outstanding. Where are you at in the book right now? Is there any, is there any tidbits or any, elevator pitches that you can give us on this book?
So right now, what I'll say is that, kind of looking back at that first lesson, right? When I said, hey, that principle of setting conditions worked in combat, that principle of setting conditions worked in corporate, kind of a sneak peek of some things that I'll throw in there is that it also works in parenting. Quick example of that real quick. So my kids have cell phones. They're teenagers. They're 13 and 14 years old. They have cell phones. They think that the reason I purchase them cell phones and the reason that I pay the bill every day or every month is simply so they can talk to their friends and have social media, right? But that's not it. When I got them cell phones, one of the things that I did for them, they may not have realized, is I also set conditions as a parent. When they get up and go to school in the morning, sometimes I get up with them. Most of the time, though, I don't wake them up and get them ready. That is their job, their responsibility. By me giving them a phone, that device has an internal alarm set on it, right? So now they are able, I have enabled them to manage their own success. So they can set their own alarm, they can wake themselves up. I have set conditions for them to be successful in waking up in the morning and catching a bus on time. I've taught them how to cook their own breakfast. So again, I've set conditions. I've done things and taught them things that allows for their own success. Now, all I can do, just like the manager, just like the machine gun team, all I can do is set conditions to allow their success. At the end of the day, they have to own their own success or their own failure. So that's kind of a tidbit on how, that simple principle of setting conditions, which is rules, policies, procedures, things that are put in place to allow the success of other people. It works in parenting. It works in corporate America. It works in combat.
The Sergeant Major throwing it down. You know what that reminds me of? There was an admiral. I believe he was an admiral, but rank doesn't matter right now because what he said was outstanding. He opened up with making your bed, and he would go back to making your bed. And I believe he gave the graduation speech, Texas A&M, several years back, but he went completely viral online and on YouTube. I don't know how many millions of times that people have watched this speech, but it's one of the best motivational speeches that I've ever heard. And again, making your bed. It's as simple as making your bed, right?
Mm-hmm. It's a lot that goes into it. An entire lot goes. And like you said, though, we look at the surface thing, setting your alarm, making your bed. These seemingly small tasks, there's a lot of weight behind them, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot that we learn from making our bed. We get into a routine, we get into a pattern, we establish good habits. And that's how I like to view life. Like it's never just a drive to the store. It's never just pulling into the parking lot. There is always a lesson for us. Everywhere we look, there's lessons every single day. We just have to be attentive enough to stop just for a brief second, pause, and look at what life is trying to teach us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's signs everywhere. I mean, I see signs. You got to be open to it, and you got to be ready to receive. And I think that there's so many people out there in today's world that it's so crazy, so fast paced that mm-hmm. people don't ever just stop. I was on a walk yesterday and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make myself present right now. All mm-hmm. I feel is the concrete that my steps are walking on right now. And I'm looking around, I'm looking at the trees. I'm watching the wind blow them. I'm watching a couple of leaves fall off. I see the ducks out in the pond, see a bird fly over. Being present and being grounded, I think is very, very important. Especially even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, because that's, I think that's so important in this hustle, bustle. Everyone's always going. You've got increased anxiety because you're always 100 miles an hour, and that will end up just driving you off the cliff if you're not careful.
I think you're spot on. And what I like about what you said, Brian, was that you made yourself stop, right? To me, that says you stopping was deliberate. It wasn't by accident. It wasn't by chance. You made the deliberate step to stop and say, you know what? Let me stop. Let me breathe. Let me take it all in. What's going on around me? Because it is so easy to go through life at 100 miles an hour, and you're going at such a fast pace that you miss everything around you. And we know that time is one of those things that we don't get back. So we really have to maximize it, every second that we have throughout the day.
Mm-hmm. The same thing happened to me 15 months ago. That's when I was on that very walk, probably on the same, in the very same area where I had this like calling that say, hey, the next phase of your life, you're going to start a podcast. And I didn't know what that looked like. And I didn't know if it would last, but it's been something for me that has really changed the course of my life in a positive way. I've got to meet so many great people and learn so much value that I could pass on to my friends and families and colleagues and strangers on the road. Could be a neighbor across the street. And, my great neighbor, Auntie, she's amazing. And there's so much value that could be added to so many people out there from so many bright minds as yourself. And it's really given me a great opportunity to grow myself, as a man and as a father. And again, you are doing some amazing work out there, and it's certainly not going unnoticed. Now, I want to go back to the transition because that's what I hear a lot about. That is really giving veterans a hard time in today's world. Now, is there anything, and this is coming from James, not from Sergeant Major Cabarrus, is there anything that the military can do in addition to getting veterans ready for the civilian world to set them up for success rather than failure?
Yeah, Brian. So, we definitely have great programs in place that are designed, to help out with the transition, right? We get talks and periods of instruction from the VA, from people that are in the civilian job market. I think that the real or the only probably hang up really is with the leadership that's currently in place, right? So if we truly think about it, nobody that's active duty understands how to retire because they've never done it. And regardless of how somebody explains to you about retirement or transition, until you go through that period of life yourself, it can be hard to explain, right? And it doesn't matter if you transition in the form of retirement or just decided that your service was over and you wanted to exit out in EAS. Everybody that has kind of the keys to the recipe or the keys to the safe is already on the outside. So I think that it would be extremely valuable if the military did a better job as a whole, the entire DOD, as bringing people back who have recently transitioned to offer their tips, offer their tricks, talk about the roadblocks and the adversity that they faced in their transition. Because unfortunately, even when I was active duty, as a sergeant major, and I would talk to Marines about getting out, I would tell them what I knew, what friends had told me, and what I read. But I wasn't speaking from a position of experience because I had not done it yet. So I think that there needs to be a team of advisors that stays connected, to active duty service members. They're probably in the best position to aid, guide, and mentor and coach those Marines or sailors or soldiers on getting out and transitioning.
Right. Now, I look at it like perhaps it's like a fingerprint, right? There's not going to be one transition that's going to be the same. Everybody's going to have a different fingerprint, if you will.
Absolutely.
Depending on what route they take. And I do know, again, from being at Camp Hope yesterday and being a big part in the veteran community as a national veteran advocate and really helping just talking to folks that maybe having a bad day or going through some hard times in life. Now, when you were a sergeant major, did you see a lot of these active duty Marines struggling and having issues with mental health prior to them getting out?
I did. And we've made great strides, in the Marine Corps at opening that up, making it okay to not be okay. So, and I think that there'll always be a certain level of stigmatism associated with going to get help with using mental health services. But I think we've made good strides at, that being okay. Like your career is not going to be damaged. Your career is not going to be over if you decide to go and get help. But I would say in recent years, there has been quite a great influx with Marines specifically that are going to get help through mental health services and counseling. And like that barbecue grill that we talked about earlier, right? That coal, once that coal is set aside, what we have to do a better job of ensuring is that where's that coal at now? Because it's no longer at Camp Lejeune. Now it's in Omaha, Nebraska. And is there a network of other coals in Omaha, Nebraska to keep that Marine or that veteran, to keep them hot, keep them warm, and surround themselves with that, right? We got technology that is great. So it's not impossible to get somewhere as that coal and just, be isolated, but to bring in a family and a team. Here in Houston, that network is deep. You're a part of that network. Dr. Jones is a part of that network. There are so many amazing people here that if you're that cold and you come on over to Houston, Texas, like you have the ability to surround yourself with positive people who are influential in the community to kind of wrap you in and keep you hot. But the veteran still owns the ultimate responsibility of reaching out and advocating for themselves.
Yeah, sure. They do own that ultimate responsibility because what I often say is you can't help somebody that's not willing to help themselves. Yeah. I mean, that's the first step is saying, okay, look, I need to get some help here. I don't like the direction that my life is heading. I'm going to be dead. I'm going to be arrested. I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose everything that I've worked so hard for in my life because of post-traumatic stress or, something, bad that's going on in life that perhaps could be, traced back to military service. So really, how can we get that hot coal back in the fire?
So we have a tracking system, right? Once a Marine, and this is specifically for folks that are getting out and not retiring, right? So there's a database of where are these Marines at now that they're outside of the military? What city and state do they reside in? And I get it. Some of that information can be private. There's some PII and maybe some laws involved in it. But if that database was sent, to the Military Affairs Veterans Office here in Houston, at least now they have a contact list they can work through of at least, reaching out and saying, hey, welcome home or welcome to the area. We understand that you're a veteran, you're recently transitioning, or you've done the transition. Here's how we can help. Here are the services and resources that we provide in this city, in this state, to help you out with your transition. And I think that's one way, just through sheer connectedness and, just reaching out and bringing that person back into the fold.
Mm-hmm. And for you, you've served in all facets, of the Marine Corps, from, combat to being a recruiter and everything in the middle. Do you think that that's better abled you and better prepared you for the civilian sector? Because I look at being a recruiter, a lot like a civilian job. Of course, you've got to make mission. Of course, you got to put recruits on deck. There's but it almost seems as if being a recruiter is really going to set you up for success once you get out, because the job is so demanding. It requires a lot of hours. It requires a lot of connecting with people, and not with just the kids, but with their parents as well. You've got to be influential. You got to say, hey, look, I'm looking out for Johnny's best interest here.
Yeah.
Has that really prepared you? And do you think it prepares other recruiters for success once they enter the civilian sector?
100%. If I had to pick one duty, one assignment of 23 years that has really enabled me to be successful outside of the Marine Corps, it would hands down, without a doubt, be recruiting duty. And I think one of the main reasons is, on recruiting duty, you come in contact with so many different people, different ages, just different kinds of people. You're talking to principals, you're talking to parents, you're talking to guidance counselors, you're talking to community leaders. So it kind of forces you to be a chameleon, right? You have to be a chameleon. You have to learn to engage in different circles, talk in different circles, and really just kind of be comfortable with a myriad of different people. So that skill set right there of being able to get along with people, being able to communicate, being able to offer balanced feedback, being able to explain something, those kind of skill sets are they transcend both sides of the fence, whether you're active duty or retired, right? Those kind of skill sets is a common denominator for success, regardless of what you're doing.
Now, those 115 veterans that I saw yesterday have all had struggles with their transition from military to civilian life. And a lot of these folks are young. They're between the ages of, say, 25 and 40. And the crazy thing is that's about how many veterans are taking their lives every single day. Now, I was quoted 45 by Camp Hope yesterday. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that the VA put out a study 2 years ago that says anywhere between 18 to 22 veterans taking their life every single day. Do you know the underlying condition on why this is happening?
I think it's such a change in dynamics of what that veteran was used to, maybe what they were asked to do during their time in active duty. And then as they transition out, I call it, jumping the fence, going to the other side of the fence. I think that a lot of times they find themselves in a place of just pure hopelessness, and they don't, maybe they don't have the best coping skills. So with that, they turn sometimes to drugs, to alcohol, to cope as that form of stress relief. And as we know, that can be just a downhill spiral. So I think that one of the most effective things can be taught, or taught even more, or harped on even more while active duty, is how to cope. We have to know and understand, how do I cope? How do I relieve stress? What's my release button? right? To some, it may be the outdoors. To some, it may be painting. To some, it may be just family time, attending sporting events. Whatever it is, everybody has to have a pressure release valve. If you don't have a valve that releases that pressure in life, because I can't guarantee many things, but what I can guarantee is that pressure in life is going to come. It's going to rain. No matter what, it is going to rain. The best thing you can do is have your umbrella ready. And that umbrella may look a little bit different for all of us, but I think in everybody's umbrella, the ability to have a safe and healthy coping mechanism, that's key and that's vital.
Sure. And it always boils down to that triggering event that might cause their moment of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the times it's not always because of the battlefield. It could be, going through a really tough divorce. It could be, that they lost their job. It could be that they got laid off. It could be that, they had a death in the family.
Yeah.
And they can go back to those darker times that they had in the military. And then from there, I feel as things could start to unravel. And unfortunately, I think we're seeing, a lot of that as well. And a lot of it too, I hear, is that, there could be, VA claims being denied. And they're like, no one's hearing me. No one's listening to me. My cries for help are getting louder and louder, and they're falling on deaf ears. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean anything to anybody anymore. I'd be better off not here. And then bad things happen. And then we have another statistic on the table here. And I bring this up to you because you are a solid man. And like I said, a sergeant major in the United States Marine Corps, somebody that, people will look to for that guidance and that motivation and that will to live and to adapt and everything that you teach, to not only civilians now, but
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of your life, to veterans and still active duty families and all that stuff there. So, your opinion really does matter. Now, one final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you were standing up in Camp Hope, as I was yesterday, I didn't speak to anybody, but they were all eating chow, 115 of them. And you had just a few minutes to give these veterans some advice, perhaps, leave them with a positive message of hope. What would that be?
I would tell them and remind them that their self-worth is not tied to an organization. Their self-worth is not tied to a specific entity, a club, and that there are people that love them, care about them, and want to see them succeed. You have to understand who you are and what you bring to the table, right? And sometimes when people are in a period or going through a period of isolation, I feel like they think that their worth is like down here. It's like, no, you are important. Somebody needs you in their life. You mean something to somebody. And at some point in your life, you're designed and equipped to do something on this earth that nobody else can do. People can replicate, they can imitate, but you have a specific purpose and a function in this life. You have to see that through. And I would just really harp in on their worth. When you mentioned that going from active duty service to the other side, right? I think that's what happens. Specifically in the Marine Corps, because you are maybe the squad leader, you are the sergeant, you were the sergeant major, you were important. People were calling you, people were emailing you, folks were soliciting you for your advice. So what happens now when the phone calls stop? What happens when the emails stop? What happens when you no longer feel important? Because that title has now been stripped away. And you can put retired behind it, but it's not the same. What happens when you went from, 500 people relying on you to no more? That stops. You have to understand that you are still worth it. You still have a new purpose and you still have a new mission in life. So find that new purpose, find that new mission, and execute that mission with the exact same vigor that you did your past mission while you were active duty.
And it does not discriminate.
100%. Rank doesn't matter. Time and service doesn't matter. Nobody is immune to falling into depression. Nobody is immune to falling into anxiety. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't care. Like you said, it doesn't discriminate.
Mm-hmm. You know, people are like, well, we didn't have this problem back in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. We're just weaker now. But I look at that as as false, because
Correct.
social media adds a lot of anxiety and depression to people's lives. Driving 90 miles an hour on the freeway in Houston, going in and out of traffic, adds a lot of anxiety to people's lives. And, you've got chaos around you, albeit a lot of the times it's controlled chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But again, life back then looked a lot different with wooden tires and horses than it does now. So, I mean, there are a lot of people out there that are definitely struggling on a daily basis that we know nothing about until it's too late. So, that's why I think it's very important to discuss these issues and these matters in a public space like this, where perhaps some veterans are self-isolating and they do go to a podcast and perhaps can gain some value and some knowledge from, a guy like Sergeant Major James Cabarrus. Now, folks, you can connect today with James Cabarrus. All you got to do is go to his website, reliablesolution4u.com. It's right there on the screen. If you're listening on Spotify, it is reliablesolution4u.com. Or if you're on LinkedIn, the very professional site now for retired sergeant majors. All you got to do is just type in his name, James Cabarrus, at James Cabarrus, no space, that's Cabarrus. Sergeant Major, it has been an absolute pleasure having you back on the show. And really, in this 42 minutes, I mean, it has been a solid conversation, again, packed full of value for folks to just absorb it. Come into this show like a dried up sponge, and you can absorb what you want. But when you're done, I know that there's going to be a very full sponge there for folks to kind of pick and choose the tools that they can put in their bags to better their lives and the lives around them by just learning and using these teachings, again, as knowledge to better themselves and, again, those around them. Folks, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the program. It has never been easier to listen to this podcast. We're on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TikTok, Twitter, and LinkedIn. I'm even on LinkedIn. Simply search Today with Tally. Also learn more about me and my personal story, and perhaps even get my new book at briantally.com. That's briantally.com. Folks, remember to stay inspired, stay encouraged, stay motivated, and always stay in the fight. Until next time, for the Today with Tally podcast, this is Brian Tally. Good night, Semper Fi, and God bless.